Hi class, this is your lecture video on American exceptionalism. I often ask my classes if they've heard of American exceptionalism. Most people have not, but then they do recognize the sort of central idea behind it usually, which is that the United States is a special, unique nation. It has a special, unique history and mission in the world. That's the idea behind American exceptionalism. Today this is a controversial view. Many people accept it, others reject it or question it at the very least. Notwithstanding those disagreements, this is a view of the United States and its role historically and in our global future. It's a view that's influenced Americans throughout their history. One older idea about American exceptionalism stretches back to the Revolution, and it regained dominance after World War I and in the 1930s. It's the idea that we should really focus on dominating the continent, or in the 20th century, I guess they would say, dominating the Americas. One big source of American uniqueness is its geographic position. The United States has tremendous resources, and those resources are protected by two vast oceans, the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean. Therefore, these proponents of American exceptionalism argued we need to resist involvement overseas, we need to resist engagement in overseas conflicts because that will inevitably sap our strength, that will weaken us. Only in this way can we preserve our exceptional heritage and future. So a good example of this, stretching back to the post-revolutionary period, would be George Washington, who says we need to avoid entangling alliances. Those alliances with these European powers, if we get involved in their various intrigues and conflicts, that will sort of suck us in, and then we will be depleted by that. For a while, many Americans at the turn of the century disagreed with this kind of isolationist view. Theodore Roosevelt is a prominent example of someone who disagrees with isolationism because he embraces a global role for the United States, as many Americans did at the turn of the century. He said the United States is now a global power, so we must do what all great powers do at this point in history. We should pursue our raw interests and become a great empire on the scale of the British Empire, the French Empire. This, after all, is what European powers had done for centuries. And in the late 19th century especially, Africa and Asia are carved up by various European powers. And in Asia, Japan is involved as well as an imperial power. So he's sort of saying there's all of this competition over territory, and we need to get a piece of the pie worldwide. We need to be a global force in that sense. Woodrow Wilson, who serves as president during World War I, subscribed to a view of American exceptionalism that took issue with both of those views, the isolationist view and the imperialist view. In contrast to isolationists, he argued that the United States must be involved internationally. We should not isolate ourselves from the world, Wilson believed. We're an economic powerhouse, for one, but also we have kind of a larger role to play, a role that must have a higher purpose than just mere self-interest. So here's Wilson kind of disagreeing with Roosevelt and the imperialists, and Wilson saying that we need to be a model of liberty and progress, and it's really ideals. American ideals need to motivate us primarily. It's our moral duty to promote democracy and capitalism worldwide. So that's Wilson in contrast to the isolationists and imperialists. If you look at the history of Wilson's administration with Mexico or the Caribbean or Central America, you may find all of this very confusing because while Wilson, in terms of his ideas, embraced liberty and self-government on the one hand, on the other hand, he did launch numerous invasions and interventions in the region in order to advance U.S. economic and/or strategic interests. So perhaps this contradiction reflects the history of progressivism. Progressives in general often were torn between their democratic ideals and impulses on the one hand, and then their desire for order and control. Many, like Wilson, opted for those latter goals, order and control, when push came to shove. That said, I want you to remember Wilson in relation to World War I especially. He was reluctant to see the United States enter the war, as you read, but once the United States joined the fight, he brings his view of American exceptionalism to the fore in that he envisions the United States in the role in the post-war process, the peace process, and in the war itself as a force for good. This is a war for democracy, he proclaimed, against despotism, against militarism, represented by Germany. And Wilson drew on his view of the United States as a special nation with a special destiny when he sought to refashion the peace that would govern post-war relations. Wilson brought his ideas to the peace conference at Versailles. There's a peace conference at Versailles to sort of settle the war at the end of World War I, when Germany and the Central Powers really sort of are in defeat. Wilson felt that the United States, with its democratic heritage, had much to offer the cause of global peace, the question of how do we avoid a new world war. One of his many proposals was that world leaders form a League of Nations and that the United States participate and lead in this effort. The League, in Wilson's view, would allow member nations an international forum for resolving disputes before those disputes exploded into some kind of larger or world scale war. The League was a precursor to the United Nations, and it does form. However, it was weakened in part by the refusal of the United States to join the League. Wilson and much of the American public disagreed, as it turned out. Wilson saw an international role for the United States in the post-war period, whereas many Americans after World War I were weary of conflict, weary of particularly conflicts overseas, and they're pretty eager to retreat back to the Americas behind those historically protective barriers of the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. However, the Pacific barrier would fall on December 7, 1941, when Japan launched a surprise attack against Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. With this attack, Wilson's vision of the United States as a global actor and leader took on a new and powerful significance. So I'll stop there. You all have a very nice week. Thanks.